Some pretty peculiar things have happened in the 6th season of Fortnite OG, further solidifying the connection between OG Storyline and Battle Royale Storyline. The important moments that happened this season, from the red cube appearing in the in-between and its involvement in the 0-hour event, to the IO Bunker's 2 Morse code messages, make OG Season 6 arguably the most important OG season we've received so far. This season will have a bigger impact on the story than most realize. To briefly recap the previous OG season's lore, the red rift energy from the sideways rift transferred into Kevin the Cube, resulting in its powers and runes to change. The cube then rolled around the island just like it did all those years ago, placing its runes one by one. However, this time, its runes were a tad bit different as a result of the red rift energy altering their shape. Apart from that, everything else played out relatively the same that season other than the moon in the sky, which changed from a blood red color to a purple one along with the IO bunker lights, suggesting that the past imagined order were doing something with the moon on the island. At the end of the season, the red cube dissolved into Loot Lake, which transformed its blue waters into a crimson red color. With that now out of the way, let's start with the main character of OG Season 6. As always, a previous Chapter 1 character from their respective season returned to the island, and this time it was the werewolf known as Dyer. His new outfit is titled Werewolf Dyer. Werewolf Dyer's set name is titled Blood Moon, and even his dialogue mentioned honoring a red moon. However, the thing is, his emote and contrails showed a normal moon, and there was no blood moon that appeared in Season 6. I guess that could somehow be referring to the red moon that appeared last season, but I just don't see the correlation between the two, since that moon wasn't present in Season 6, nor was Dyer present in Season 5. And just like last season, when Drift's description mentioned the unknown with a capitalized U, Dyer's description did as well, and it read "Howl into the unknown," further highlighting the importance of reality unknown, which is where the OG island is located. Other than that, in his dialogue, Dyer also revealed that he recognized the island, but he had one line that was more important and interesting than the rest. "The eye of time is upon us, soldier." I believe that line was Dyer realizing that he's in the actual past of Reality Zero. Dyer seemed to understand that the past is replaying, and all the alterations that happen here on this island will have a significant impact on both the present and the future of Reality Zero. I also believe that line was teasing the pivotal moment that happened in the butterfly event. But before we get to that, let's go over the cube in the IO bunker. The cube and its runes returned back to their original purple state at the start of this season. This was because, using the cube, the red rift energy transferred below the island and into the core of the 0 point. Throughout the season, the cube island would go to each rune it placed around the island last season, collecting their energy. Almost everything that happened with the cube island this season happened exactly the same as it did back in the original Season 6. However, there was one singular difference. Some of the cube growth within the island was red, signifying that although the red rift energy transferred out of the cube and into the in-between, it still left somewhat of a mark on Kevin the Cube. As for the cube's runes, the red rift energy at each rune divided into 3 red rift oddities, which amounted to a total of 21 red rift oddities on the island. These red rift oddities are what caused the shadow stones at the rune sites to spawn as havoc stones instead. The first time the bunker lights began transmitting Morse code through a flashing red light this season was a bit before the butterfly event. The Morse code from the bunker could be translated into the word Titans. I believe the word Titans was referring to the race of creatures that the Dark Presence is part of. I mention this because maybe the reason why the Morse code was saying Titans is because the past IO have possibly discovered the source of the Red Rift butterfly. It's theorized that the Red Rift butterfly was potentially sent by the Dark Presence, and given that he was very evidently a Titan, the IO must have been panicking that a Titan from another reality was messing with the island, and that the rift energy it sent had successfully infiltrated the in-between. Although I should clarify, I only believe that the Dark Presence was used by someone else to send the rift butterfly, so the butterfly couldn't be traced back to the one who was truly orchestrating all of these alterations in OG. Which leads us into the event of this season. Kevin the Cube exploded like it did all those years ago, but this time when we entered the in-between, the red cube was there. It changed a small sector of the dimension's lines to a red color. Normally, pulses within these lines would all go to the center of the in-between, that being the 0 point. However, due to the red cube's presence, those pulses began moving the opposite direction direction, and tons of stars appeared on those lines, suggesting that these lines were being altered, or at least that's what I theorized was going on. For those of you who don't know, the in-between is a dimension within the 0 point itself, very likely within its core. These lines we see are actual realities. This dimension is basically one large circuit board connecting every single reality within the 0 point as its core, and the lines as its traces. So the red cube's presence was changing some of its circuitry. The in-between appearing in OG is also basically confirmation that the 0 point is here, meaning this is the passive reality 0. Remember, there is only one 0 point, and wherever the 0 point is, that's where reality 0 is. Although, how did the red cube end up in the in-between? I believe the red rift energy was able to duplicate the cube, and that's why we ended up seeing the normal purple cube on the island and the red cube in the in-between and later in the chapter 6 finale. Nevertheless, the rest of the butterfly event played out the same while the red cube continued altering a sector of the in-between. Shortly after the event ended, the iceberg that splintered off the ice moon could be seen in the distance, slowly drawing closer to the island by the day. However, a week before the Chapter 6 finale event, the IO bunker Morse code changed again. This time it read 0 hour, meaning the past IO were watching what was happening in Reality 783, completely solidifying the connection between OG and BR. After the Chapter 6 finale event ended, a lot of people were wondering if the red cube that appeared in the event was the same one from OG. I believe this was indeed the case, which in turn would explain why the IO bunker's Morse code read both Titans and 0 hour. The bunker was teasing OG's involvement in the event, which we saw with the red cube. But how did Jones know about the cube? I honestly don't think he did. All he wanted to do was rift in the cube he remembered from chapter 1, but because of the alterations in OG, the cube became red, so naturally it brought in the red cube. The reason he probably didn't question its color is because he didn't care as long as the cube took care of the dark presence, which it did with the help of the mecha team leader. By the time the cube arrived in Reality 783, it probably already finished altering the realities it was tasked with changing within the in-between, so it being pulled out of that dimension doesn't really matter. And that wraps it up for the entire Season 6 OG storyline explained. Season 7 OG has started and we've already received a crazy reveal. Lynx is now a member of the Last Reality who is working under Dark Voyager. The Ice King is supposedly set to appear in Chapter 7 too, so we might possibly see a new remix of him in the replay of the Ice King event. There's a lot we'll be going over next season, so stay tuned for my video covering all the lore of OG Season 7. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one, Lore Keepers.